While I lay in a hospital bed, fighting for my life after a horrible car accident, the door burst open. My cruel mother-in-law stormed in, her eyes burning with rage, without a shred of concern for my condition. She demanded that I sign over my house, valued at $1 million, to her. When I refused, in an instant she punched me in the stomach with such force that a scream of agony escaped my throat. But the worst was yet to come. My terrified 7-year-old daughter ran to protect me, but what my mother-in-law did to my little girl was even more heartbreaking. My name is Nancy Carter, and I'm 43 years old. I've been married to Adam Carter for over 10 years, and together we have a beautiful 7-year-old daughter, Lily. From the outside, our family seems perfect. Adam is a hard-working and loving husband, and I've dedicated my life to creating a warm and loving home for our daughter. But behind closed doors, life in our house is far from peaceful. The reason? Vivian Carter, my mother-in-law. From the moment I married Adam, she made it clear that she never wanted me as her son's wife. She treated me like a stranger in my own home. No matter what I did, it was never enough for her. If dinner was perfect, she found fault in the way I set the table. If I cleaned the house, she pointed out any speck of dust I'd missed. She made me feel like a guest in her son's house, constantly reminding me that this was Adam's house, not mine. It didn't matter that Adam and I shared responsibilities and were building a life together. To Vivian, I was nothing more than a nuisance. Adam always tried to be the peacemaker. Ignore her, Nancy. That's just how she is. Don't let it affect you, he'd tell me. He loved his mother, and I didn't want to come between them, so I endured it for years. I endured it, but Vivian wasn't just controlling. She was also possessive. She believed Adam belonged to her and saw me as the woman who had snatched him away. She never accepted that he had his own family and made sure I felt unwelcome every day. Even our daughter, Lily, suffered her grandmother's harshness. If she played too loudly, Vivian would yell at her. If she left her toys in the living room, she'd scold her for being messy. I did the best I could to protect my daughter from her grandmother's cruelty, but I saw the confusion in Lily's eyes. She didn't understand why her own grandmother treated her mother with such coldness.
Still, I kept silent.
I told myself that as long as Adam was with me and Lily was happy, I could endure Vivian's bitterness. But I had no idea what was coming. I didn't know that everything was about to change. For years I lived under Vivian's control, enduring her constant insults, manipulations, and venomous comments. But then something happened that changed everything. I received an inheritance that gave me the power to break free. My father passed away and left me, in his will, a house valued at $1 million. It was a beautiful 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood, filled with memories of my childhood. But more than just a house, it was security for me and Lily, a chance to start over. As soon as the inheritance became official, Vivian's attitude changed drastically. For the first time in years, she stopped insulting me. She started acting strangely sweet and concerned, feigning interest in my future. But I knew her kindness wasn't genuine. One night, while I was in the living room folding laundry, Vivian mentioned the subject with apparent indifference. "Nancy, dear, have you thought about what you'll do with that house?" she asked with a forced smile. I immediately tensed up. I knew this was going somewhere dangerous. "I plan to keep it. It's for Lily," I replied firmly. Her eyes darkened for a split second, but she quickly feigned her smile again. "Oh, honey, that's a lot of responsibility for someone like you. Managing a property isn't easy, you know." I knew perfectly well where she was going with this. "I'll manage just fine," I said without hesitation. Vivian sighed dramatically and leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Listen to me, Nancy. The smartest thing you could do is put the house in Adam's name so we can manage it properly, as a family." There it was, the real reason behind her sudden concern. That we didn't include me. It referred only to her. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain calm.
"No.
This house was my father's gift to me and Lily. It stays in my name." Her smile vanished instantly. She sat back, crossing her arms. Her false kindness evaporated in seconds, leaving only cold irritation. "You're making a big mistake, Nancy," she said sharply. "You don't know how to handle something like this. You need someone more capable, someone who knows how to manage property. Adam and I can make sure it's used correctly." I shook my head. I appreciate the concern, but I don't need anyone to manage my house for me. Her lips pressed into a tense line. Suddenly, she stood up abruptly. "You'll regret this," she spat coldly. Without saying another word, she turned and left the room. A chill ran down my spine. I had just stood up to Vivian for the first time, and I knew she wasn't going to let it go. The days passed, and she barely spoke to me. Her cold stares and curt tone made it clear that she was furious because I refused to give up my inheritance. But for the first time, I didn't care. I was finally defending what was mine. Adam, however, seemed completely oblivious to the growing tension between his mother and me. He had been busy with work, preparing for an important business trip. One night, while I was tucking Lily into bed, Adam came into the room looking exhausted. "Nancy, can we talk?" he asked, rubbing the back of his neck. I stepped out into the hallway with him. "Everything okay?" He sighed deeply. "I just got a message from the company. I have to leave on an urgent business trip for at least 2 weeks." My heart sank. Adam had always been my shield against Vivian. Even though he never fully realized how manipulative she was, his mere presence kept her in check. With him gone, I would be completely alone with her. "Do you really have to go?" I asked in a whisper. He took my hands gently. "I wouldn't go if it wasn't important, Nancy. This deal could secure our stability for years to come." I looked into his warm, reassuring eyes, knowing I couldn't be the reason he turned down such an opportunity. I forced a small smile. "I understand. Focus on your work. I'll take care of everything here." He kissed my forehead. "That's why I love you, Nancy. You always support me." From the corner of the hallway, I noticed Vivian watching us. The moment Adam confirmed his trip, her expression changed. Her eyes gleamed with something, a look of opportunity. I shook off the unease, but deep down I knew something was coming. Vivian had just gotten the perfect opportunity. Adam would be gone, and for the first time, I would be completely vulnerable. I had no idea how far she was willing to go. The next morning, Adam said goodbye to Lily and me before heading to the airport. As he walked out the door, a strange feeling of unease settled in my chest. Vivian barely acknowledged his departure. She simply stood by the kitchen counter, sipping her coffee, her eyes fixed on me, lurking with an unreadable expression. I ignored her. I had more important things to think about, like how to get through the next 2 weeks without Adam. That evening, I decided to take Lily to the supermarket. She had been asking me for chocolate chip pancakes for days, and after the tense morning with Vivian, I thought a little mother-daughter time would do us good. "Come on, sweetie," I said, grabbing the car keys. "Let's get your favorite snack." Lily grinned, put on her little jacket, and ran excitedly to the car.
Yes.
"Pancakes for breakfast." I buckled her into her car seat, and we started the drive to the store. The drive was quiet. Lily hummed softly along with the radio, swinging her little legs with glee. For a brief moment, I let myself relax. Maybe today, everything would be okay. Arriving at the supermarket, I found a parking spot near the entrance. "Okay, Lily, stay in the car. I won't be long." "Yes, Mommy," she replied, swinging her feet as she waited. I unbuckled my seatbelt, got out of the car, and closed the door behind me. And then it all happened too fast. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw it, a dark car speeding directly towards me. I barely had time to react before the impact. The force of the collision threw me backwards, slamming me against the pavement with brutal force. A sharp, searing pain shot through my entire body. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Everything was a blur. The screech of tires, distant gasps, and a small voice screaming desperately, "Mommy." Through the haze of pain, I heard Lily's panicked cries. "Help! Someone help my mommy!" I tried to move, but my body wouldn't respond. An intense burning spread through my ribs and legs. I wanted to reassure her, to tell her I was okay, but I couldn't even lift my head. People started running towards me. Some store employees and customers crowded around. "Call an ambulance," someone yelled. A man knelt beside me and checked my pulse. Ma'am, stay with us. Help is on its way. Through my blurry vision, I saw Lily sobbing, her small hands clinging to my arm desperately. Mommy, wake up, please. A woman who appeared to be the store manager gently took her and rubbed her back to calm her down. It's okay, honey. Help is coming. Moments later, sirens wailed in the distance. The paramedics arrived quickly and began to assess me. Possible broken ribs and fractured legs, one of them said. Needs immediate transport. Lily refused to let go of me. I want to go with my mommy, she cried, clutching my fingers tightly. One of the paramedics nodded and let her ride with me in the ambulance. As the doors closed, the last thing I saw was my daughter's tear-stained face. Then everything faded into a black pain. The first thing I felt when I woke up was a dull ache radiating from my ribs and extending to my legs. I tried to move, but my body simply wouldn't respond. I blinked against the harsh white hospital light, slowly processing my surroundings, the constant beeping of machines, the murmur of nurses outside my room, and most importantly, a small, warm hand holding mine. I turned my head slightly, wincing at the stabbing pain in my side. Lily was sitting next to my bed, her little fingers intertwined with mine, her pale face still bearing traces of dried tears. As soon as she saw me open my eyes, she gasped. Mommy. Relief flooded her voice, and before I could say anything, she leaned in and hugged my arm gently. I was so scared. I thought you weren't going to wake up. I swallowed the lump in my throat and squeezed her little hand with what little strength I had.
I'm okay, sweetie.
I'm here. The door opened, and a nurse came in with a kind smile. Mrs. Carter, so glad you're awake. That's a very good sign. She checked my pain medication levels and blood pressure before continuing. You were in a bad accident, but you're stable now. Your ribs are badly bruised and you have fractures in both legs, so you'll have to stay in the hospital for a while. I nodded weakly, trying to take it all in. I had been hit by a car. I was in a hospital bed. Adam was still out of the country. And Vivian. A shiver ran down my spine. I didn't have to wonder where she was for long. Barely an hour later, the door opened again. Vivian Carter walked in, but she wasn't alone. In one hand, she carried a bouquet of flowers, her face feigning an expression of sympathy. In the other, she held a stack of papers. My body tensed instantly. Vivian had never cared about me. She barely tolerated my presence in her son's life. And now, after years of treating me with contempt, she was suddenly acting like a concerned mother-in-law. Something wasn't right. Oh, Nancy, dear, she said dramatically as she approached my bed. Such a terrible accident. How are you feeling? I forced a neutral expression.
I'm managing.
She sighed, placing the flowers on the bedside table. Poor thing. It must be so difficult being trapped in bed, unable to do anything for yourself. A chill ran down my spine. She wasn't here out of concern. She was testing the waters, reminding me how defenseless I was. I didn't respond. And then she dropped the act. She pulled a thick envelope out of her purse and placed it on my lap. I didn't have to open it to know what it was. Property transfer documents. My stomach nodded. Sign this, Nancy, Vivian ordered, her tone now sharp and authoritarian. I didn't move. What is this? She scoffed, a cynical smile playing on her lips. Don't play dumb. It's the transfer for your father's house. You're in no condition to manage a property, so the best thing is to hand it over to me. I clenched my jaw.
No.
Her eyes darkened instantly. The false kindness was gone. You're in no position to refuse, she murmured, leaning towards me, her voice dangerously low. Adam isn't here to protect you. You're defenseless, trapped in this hospital bed, completely at my mercy. My fingers dug into the blanket. Vivian wasn't just trying to steal my house. She was threatening me. But I wasn't going to break. I took a deep breath, ignoring the stabbing pain in my ribs, and looked her straight in the eye. I'm never going to sign those papers. Vivian's face contorted with fury. Before I could react, she grabbed my wrist and pushed the documents closer to me. Sign it, Nancy, she hissed through gritted teeth. I tried to pull my hand away, but I was too weak. Her grip tightened. I said, "Sign it." When I continued to refuse, Vivian exploded. Her face was filled with pure hatred, and she suddenly raised her fist and punched me hard in the stomach. A wave of excruciating pain tore through my broken body. I gasped for air, my vision blurring, and the room began to spin. I could barely process what had just happened. And then I heard Lily's terrified scream. "Stop. Leave her alone." My little girl was standing at the doorway with a small carton of juice in her hand. Her little face was pale with fear, her small body trembling. The juice carton fell to the floor with a thud, and without thinking, she ran towards me, trying to shield me with her small arms. "Help! Someone help my mommy!" she screamed with all her might. Vivian whirled around, her eyes wide with panic, but it was too late. The hospital door burst open. A nurse and 2 security guards rushed in. They froze at the scene. "Get away from her," the nurse yelled. Vivian tried to compose herself, forcing a fake smile. "This is a misunderstanding. I was just..." But the guards didn't believe her for a second. One of them firmly gripped her arm and pulled her away from my bed. "Ma'am, you just assaulted a patient in a hospital. You're under arrest." Vivian struggled desperately. "You can't do this. I'm Adam's mother." The officer ignored her protests and began to escort her towards the door. Before leaving, she turned her head and gave me one last look, filled with fury. "Adam will never forgive you for this, Nancy. You'll pay for this." I held her gaze, but I felt no fear, no regret, only relief.
No, Vivian, y whispered calmly.
"This time, you're the one who pays." The door slammed shut behind her, and for the first time in years, I finally felt safe. I could still hear Vivian yelling in the hallway, struggling against the security guards, but her voice faded as they took her away. I let out a shaky breath. My ribs were burning with pain, but in that moment, the only thing I could focus on was Lily. She was still standing next to me, her small hands clenched into fists, those big brown eyes filled with fear and confusion. I took her little hand and pulled her close. "It's okay, sweetie," I whispered, gently stroking her hair. "She's gone. She can't hurt us anymore." Lily sobbed and buried her face against my shoulder. "I was so scared, Mommy." I closed my eyes, swallowing the lump in my throat. She shouldn't have had to see that. She shouldn't have seen her own grandmother turn into a monster. But at least now it was over. The nurse checked my vitals to make sure I was stable before giving us some privacy. I took a deep breath and grabbed my phone. Adam had to know. I dialed his number with trembling hands. It rang twice before he answered. "Nancy." His voice sounded sleepy, as if I'd woken him in the middle of the night. "Is everything okay? What's wrong?" I swallowed hard and breathed shakily. "Adam, I need you to come home."
Now.
There was an incident. There was a pause. Then his voice changed instantly, becoming tense and alert. "What happened?" I closed my eyes, feeling tears sting my eyelids. "Your mother," she attacked me. The silence hung heavy. I could hear him breathing raggedly on the other end of the line. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and dangerous. "What?" I forced myself to continue. "She tried to make me sign over my house. When I refused, she hit me. She would have done more if Lily hadn't screamed for help." Another long, tense pause. Then I heard movement. "I'm booking the first flight home," Adam said, his voice sharp with fury.
"Stay where you are.
I'll be there soon." Less than 24 hours later, Adam burst into my hospital room. He looked exhausted from the journey, but his eyes burned with a mixture of anger and concern. "Nancy." His voice softened as he approached me. He took my hand in his and ran his thumb gently over my knuckles. "Are you okay?" I nodded weakly. "I will be." But Adam, this time she went too far.
His jaw tightened.
"Where is she now?" I exhaled slowly. "She's in police custody. I pressed charges." He stared at me for a moment, then nodded.
"Good."
There were no questions, no denials, no excuses. For the first time, I saw it in his eyes. He was done protecting her. Adam sat beside me, holding my hand tightly. His grip was firm, reassuring. "She's going to pay for this," he said quietly. "We'll make sure of it." I looked at him uncertainly. "You—" He held my gaze, and his expression softened. "Nancy, I've always believed you. I never thought she'd go this far. But now I see it. I see exactly who she is." I swallowed hard, relief washing over me. "I want her to face real consequences, Adam." My voice was firm. "I'm going to press full charges. I want her to pay for everything she's done." He nodded without hesitation. "Then we'll get the best lawyer. I'll handle everything." His gaze was determined. "She's not going to get away with this." For the first time since the accident, I felt like everything was going to be all right. For the first time in years, I felt truly safe. Vivian had spent so long trying to destroy me, to make me feel insignificant. But now, I had something she could never take away: justice. And I was going to make sure she paid for every single one of her actions. With Adam fully on my side, I finally felt like I had the strength to fight back. The next morning, Adam contacted one of the best lawyers in the city, Emma Reynolds, a sharp and direct woman specializing in domestic abuse and fraud cases. When she arrived at the hospital to meet with me, she didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Nancy, I've reviewed the security footage and medical reports," she said, flipping through a thick file. "Your mother-in-law isn't just facing assault charges. This is attempted coercion and financial fraud. We have enough evidence to ensure she receives the maximum sentence." Adam, sitting next to me, clenched his jaw. "I want her prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law," he said firmly. "There will be no leniency. She has to pay for what she did to my wife." Hearing those words from his mouth made my chest tighten with emotion. For years, I had faced Vivian's cruelty alone. But now, for the first time, I had someone fighting with me, not against me. Emma laid out all the evidence we had: the hospital surveillance footage showing Vivian attacking me, witness testimonies from the nurse, security guards, and medical staff, my medical records documenting the severity of my injuries, Lily's statement, which Emma assured me would be handled with extreme care due to her age, and Vivian's history of trying to manipulate and control my finances. With all of this against her, Vivian was facing very serious legal consequences. A week later, the court hearings began. Vivian's lawyer tried everything. He said it had been a moment of frustration, that she was just a concerned mother-in-law, that I was exaggerating. But Emma dismantled each of his arguments with precision. "This is not frustration," she told the judge in a firm voice. "This is about years of calculated emotional and physical abuse. This is about power, control, and greed. My client was attacked in a hospital bed, weak, defenseless, and recovering from a potentially fatal accident. There is no excuse for this." I watched Vivian squirm at her seat. For the first time, her face was pale with fear. She had lost control. When Adam took the stand, the entire courtroom fell silent. He looked directly at the judge, his voice firm and resolute. "My mother has manipulated and controlled my wife for years. I admit I was blind to it, but now I see the damage she's caused. She almost destroyed my family, and she deserves to face the consequences." His words sealed Vivian's fate. She turned to Adam in horror, tears streaming down her face. "Adam, I'm your mother," she whispered, her voice breaking. He didn't even look at her. After several days of testimony, the judge delivered the final verdict. Vivian was found guilty of aggravated assault and financial coercion. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison and ordered to pay $50,000 in damages, including my medical expenses and emotional distress. The moment the gavel struck, I felt a weight lift from my chest. Vivian had finally lost. As the guards led her out of the courtroom, she turned to look at me one last time. "You think you've won, Nancy," she sneered. "You'll regret this." I looked her in the eye, unafraid. "No, Vivian," I said softly. "For the first time, I'm free." She disappeared behind the courtroom doors, and I knew I would never see her again. The day after the trial, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in years. For so long, I lived under Vivian's shadow, enduring her cruelty, her insults, and her attempts to control my life. But now she was gone, locked away where she could never hurt me or Lily again. And for the first time, I was free. With Adam by my side, I packed the last of my things from the house I once shared with him and Vivian. That house never truly felt like mine. It had always been Vivian's territory, filled with her rules, her presence, and her control. Now I was moving into my own house, the house my father left me, the house no one could ever take away from me. When I arrived at my new home, I stepped inside and breathed deeply. It felt different from the house I left behind. There were no suffocating rules, no fear of being watched or criticized, no feeling of being a guest in my own life. This house was mine, and here I would build a new life with Lily and Adam. Lily ran from room to room, her laughter filling the empty space. "Mommy, I love our new house," she yelled as she twirled around the living room. I smiled, watching her. For the first time, she looked truly happy. She wouldn't have to live under her grandmother's constant disapproval or witness my mistreatment anymore. Here, she would grow up in a house filled with love and peace. That night, as we sat in the living room, Adam took my hand. "Nancy," he said softly, "I know I should have seen what my mother was doing to you sooner. I should have protected you better." I looked at him and saw the guilt in his eyes. He had finally realized the damage Vivian had caused. I squeezed his hand. "What matters is that you supported me when it really mattered," I replied. He nodded, his grip tightening around my hand. "I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you," he said. I smiled. For the first time in a long time, I believed him. As I sat on my new sofa in my new home, with my daughter's laughter filling the air, I knew my old life was behind me. Now I had my own home. I had my daughter, safe and happy. And I had a husband who finally saw the truth and supported me. Most importantly, I had my freedom. Vivian tried to take everything from me, but she failed. I survived, and now I would thrive. When I closed my eyes that night, I made a promise to myself. I would never let anyone control me again. Not now, not ever.